Yay!
No.
And...
Show being taken over.
At which point, he returned to his bathroom to make more videos and masturbate.
Shitty ranters.
I can't take the pressure!
Shatner acting, taking over.
Back in black.
Horrible puns. Explosions. Wait, no, stop.
So, you awakened. I'm glad you're awake. You've been in a coma for, say, a week or two.
Who are you? Where am I? Why can't we be friends? Where is the beef? Why
Hey,
can't we
I'm your dad, halfwit, and this is your new room.
But the explosion, it was so...
The explosions were a cheap editing trick that you put in there. Why'd I have to raise such a freak?
Yeah, well, your face is a freak. Yeah. Freak. Pretty snazzy. Okay, guys, well, that's all I got for you this episode. Tune in next time for,
Hey, you can't end the video yet.
Well, why not?
You can't post an episode without any content. Otherwise, you'd just be some self-absorbed director doing a masturbatorial transition video.
Right. Well, in that case, I guess I do have a little something for you. It's a little deck that I've been working on that I think is, the way it's built will be powerful enough to take on most top-tier decks this format. So, without further ado, let's get into Necro Machinas. So, first on the list is the deck's main headliner, Machina Fortress. Easy to summon, powerful stats, good effects. Next, there's the Searcher, Machina Gear Frame, running 3 of those. You normal summon him, you pull any Machina card from your deck to your hand, which for this deck would be Fortress and Force. Running 2 Machina Forces. I used to run them at 1, but their Monster Reborn-like abilities and Search ability at the same time make them very good to run at 2. We're running 2 of each gadget type. I don't like running it at 3. I don't know if it's popular to run it at 3, but at 3 each, it clogs the deck. I don't use them for combat or anything. I use them as fodder, so running them at more than 2 each is overkill. 1 Cyber Dragon. It's a good way to work around opponent Cyber Dragons. You can beat them to the punch when it comes to your field fusing. And other than that, it's just great attack power. We're running 1 Scrap Recycler. I like him because 2 of his abilities are much like Foolish Burial and Pot of Avarice. Both very useful cards, especially for this deck. It combos well with Force because I can normal summon him, dump Force to the graveyard, then pitch Fortress for Force. I can send Fortress to the graveyard, ditch 2 gadgets to special summon Fortress, and then recycle them with a second effect. He has a lot of uses, but at the same time they are kind of conditional, so I only run him at 1. Running 2 Rykos. It's excellent destruction and a good first turn setup. You can just set it and wait for them to do whatever they want to do, and then you mess it up and then it's your turn. And you have the probability of milling a Fortress, which you can recycle later. The problem is that there are a lot of cards in this deck that can't really be recycled. So I'm thinking about taking Rykos out because too many times I've milled a Dark Hole or a Pot of Avarice that I would have much rather had in my hand than in the graveyard. Neospatian Grand Mole is a great way to take care of decks like Dandy Warrior or X-Sabers, purely because it allows you to get through opponents' monsters without having to destroy them. Like, imagine your X-Saber opponent decides that they can just set up with a Dark Soul and a couple face downs first turn, and they'll be set. If you have an alright setup already, you just summon Grand Mole and say, let's both put those back in our hand. You don't have to worry about it. And same goes for Dandelion. And now for the Necro part of the Necro Machina deck, 3 Necro Valleys. I'll go more in depth with this card at the end of the video, but for now just know that this card works extremely well in this deck. 3 Book of Moons, it stops OTKs, it stops offensive strikes, it stops sinking. Very versatile with virtually 0 cost. 2 Smashing Grounds, good destruction. Pot of Avarice. I like it at 1 in this deck because I'm not doing major monster milling like Light Sworns and Dandy Warriors, but I'm doing enough of it in this deck that it warrants a Pot of Avarice that I can recycle some things. 2 Mystical Space Typhoons for those back row clearings. 1 Dark Hole, which also combos well because I have Machina Gear Frame to protect my monsters from being destroyed. 2 Bottomless Trap Holes, another control card. During playtesting, I found that I ran into a lot of traps that messed up my plays, so I'm running 2 Trap Stuns. They were initially 1 Gale and 1 Dust Tornado. I figured I had enough destruction with Machina Fortress and 2 MSTs, so the Dust Tornado was moot. And the Gale, while it gave my deck sinking power all by itself, it was only run at 1, so it didn't show up enough to warrant it staying in the deck, as opposed to me being able to keep field advantage by avoiding cards like D-Prison, Bottomless, Royal Oppression, stuff like that. Running 1 D-Prison, mostly because X-Sabers decide to sink to Hyunlei before I can activate it, so this can be sided out if I'm fighting X-Sabers, but other than that, it's just a good way to mess up an opponent's attack sweep. 1 Starlight Road. I'm trying to think of a way to put in a second one, mostly because the prevalence of Black Rose Dragon and Dark Hole in this format is crazy, so Starlight Road makes excellent protection. Torrential Tribute, just another Dark Hole for this deck. Once again, I'm protected with Gear Frame if I have it set up. Mirror Force, more OTK stopping, attack sweep stop. And lastly, Solemn Judgment, because what deck doesn't need the ability to say screw you to whatever the opponent does? Let's get back to Necro Valley. This card is so important because it plays anti to most of the meta nowadays. Blackwings, Light Sworns, what have you. Now, before we continue, it has to be noted that we're using Turbo Pack 2 errata. Most errata for Necro Valley in the past will just say that no effects involving the graveyard whatsoever cannot be activated. But this one says targeting, which is an important workaround because it works with cards like Machina Fortress, which doesn't say to select Fortress, but rather that it just gets special summoned outright. Which means that you can be playing this card against a Dandy Warrior deck. Their Debris Dragons are utterly useless, so you're limiting their options, and then you play Machina Gear Frame, and you drop the Force, or you drop the 2 gadgets, and then this guy comes back with a Vengeance, and they don't have anything that they can do. Now, it's important to note that Necro Valley stops 2 cards in your deck, and that's Pot of Avarice and Scrap Recycler. Not Scrap Recycler's first effect. You can still send things from the deck to the graveyard. You just can't target the 2 level 4 Earth machines in your graveyard to put them back in your deck to draw your card. Likewise with Pot of Avarice. You can't select 5 monsters. But you could equate this to something like running Royal Oppression and Gladiator Beast decks. It takes timing and skill to use Necro Valley in this deck, but if pulled off correctly, you can stop a majority of decks from pulling off massive graveyard plays, turning all their negatives that they expect to be plussed later into just pure negatives that they can't recollect from. Now, it's going to be said that Necro Valley is a bad card because it's a field spell. Well, I can't really argue with you there. It's kind of like in the same vein as continuous spells and traps, where the opponent knows what's going on so that they can prioritize what to destroy. But you just have to think of it as a con of the card, kind of like paying a cost. It's the risk you run while playing Necro Valley, and while you don't get an immediate plus off of them, which seems to be the trend nowadays, Necro Valley can work in the long run, especially since we're running 3 copies of them. They'll turn up fairly often, especially since most cards in this deck will thin it.
And that's all I've got to say about the Necro Machinas. But wait, there's more. I also have a blog and Twitter account, so be sure to follow me there because, you know, who doesn't want more Card Shark's opinions, am I right? As always, comment below about any improvements that can be made to the deck and subscribe because wouldn't it just be dandy to get to 100 subscribers here? Come on. Anyway, I'm Golden Nova. That's all I've got to say on the subject. See you guys next time.